So, look, we've done a lot of different things over the course of WIP Daily, which has been going on for like, I guess, 10 months now. We did it right before the NFL draft, right after or around the NFL draft. I forget, sometime late April last year, we started WIP Daily and have enjoyed doing it on a daily basis, Monday to Friday, every single day moving forward since then. But we thought, let's try to do some new things here with the show and get you guys more involved. So we put out a call for some questions. So today we're going to do our first AMA mailbag. Anything you ask, you're in charge of the show. You ask the questions. Tucker and I pick out the best ones. And Tucker will throw the questions at me that we got here. And we'll talk about them. And then, moving forward, we'll do more of these. If you have questions, if you have comments you want us to hit on a future episode, you can throw it in the YouTube or send it to myself or Tucker through anything, Twitter or wherever you find us. Send it to us there, Instagram, and we will put it in a future episode. All right, Tucker, what do we have today? We have some AMA-style questions. We'll see what the people want to talk about today.
Yeah, we got a lot of questions, a lot of Eagles questions. And we'll start with this one from Mike. Do you think the Eagles would have been more successful, or do you think the Eagles have been more successful since Andy Reid left? And as a good question asker, he added context. With Reid, they had 9 playoff appearances in 14 years. Post-Reid, they have 7 playoff appearances in 11 years, 2 Super Bowl appearances, and 1 parade.
So it's interesting. I mean, my first instinct is like, well, they were more successful with Andy than since he left. But the context Mike lays out, it's not as big as, like, the gap isn't huge, right? And the Super Bowl happened after Andy Reid. Here's what I'll say. I'll say they were more successful with Reid because of the context of what he took over. They were terrible. I mean, go back, think about the late 90s Eagles. They were awful. I know they had some pieces on defense, but generally speaking, it was not a good franchise. I thought when Andy left, although they were bad in 2012, Chip didn't take over a barren franchise. They had the bones of something here with line play, high draft pick. I mean, they had some stuff here. And obviously Howie and Jeff kind of knew what they were doing then after Andy taught them all those years. So I understand the Super Bowl sways it, but man, 5 NFC championship games and all that winning, considering what Andy took over, I don't think they've been as successful. To me, they haven't been as consistent, Tucker, as they were when Andy was here.
Yeah, I think with Andy, there's a lot less variation on a year-to-year basis, right? Especially early on when you knew they were going to be, 12 wins and in the NFC title game, which is something Howie Roseman hasn't done, right? He hasn't built anything sustainable since Andy Reid left. From tired, which I think we all feel maybe this early in the morning. After Nick Sirianni struggles in 2024, who will be the Eagles head coach the following season?
So I think that's, we've all been thinking about this, right? Like, ever since they retained Sirianni, my thought is, okay, who's next? And we did an episode a few weeks ago that I thought this was such a unique class of coaches to where they had to make a move, because how often do you get all these great candidates within the same year all out there? Now, luckily for the Eagles, if Sirianni doesn't work out, some of those guys didn't get jobs. Like Mike Vrabel didn't get a job. Bill Belichick didn't get a job. But the one name I have on top of my mind is Ben Johnson. Now, perhaps there's something there that we don't know about, that maybe he doesn't really want to be a head coach, or he's got cold feet because it's 2 years in a row now where things were weird. The Carolina Panthers wanted him 2 years ago. He said no. I think we're all like, well, that makes sense. Who wants to coach for David Tepper? But then this past year, it happened again. It just happened with the Commanders, with Josh Harris and Adam Peters. So it feels like something's going on with Ben Johnson. Maybe he's just more comfortable being a coordinator, or maybe this wasn't his fault, right? Maybe the Panthers were a bad job. He didn't want it. That was smart. Maybe he really was unimpressed with Josh Harris. I think he called him a basketball guy. Didn't think he knew anything about football. So maybe Ben Johnson's in the right here. He's the name, Tucker. If the Eagles need a coach next year, it just feels like he fits. He checks every box. He's young, offensive guy, a play caller. If I had to guess where they go and what Jeff Lurie wants, it looks like Ben Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, it's a team that often overcorrects, and you think about the anti-Nick Sirianni, it's Ben Johnson, right? It's an offensive wizard who's been able to draw up some unbelievable offensive schemes. So, I don't know. If Belichick isn't an option, isn't something they're willing to explore. I mean, Ben Johnson, I think he might have been the top candidate for a lot of teams this cycle, and because of the Lions' playoff run, because of, the way things transpired with Washington and him turning that down, I think he's going to be the top candidate again this year, depending on how things go with the Detroit Lions. So from Eric, this is a baseball question. There's a lot of talk this postseason about how the top seeds fell flat after having a week off. if the Phillies on the current roster managed to end the season in first place, do you think they'd be at a disadvantage missing the wild card series?
Yeah, I do. I think it's played out now. What, we've had 2 years of this of the extra playoff teams, so that the buys for the first 2 seeds. Something's going on here, and I don't think it's just like a blip. Now, maybe 10 years from now, we might say those first 2 years were weird. The top seeds keep getting to the World Series, but I do think it's a disadvantage. It's one, though, that if you say to me, Joe, would you rather have the disadvantage or of missing a week, right, sitting a week, or the advantage of not having to play another round, I still would take the advantage. Now, I think baseball needs to do something here, that maybe they condense the days and they get that series started quicker to help those top seeds so they don't sit a week. But yeah, Tucker, I think it is a disadvantage. I don't know how you simulate in a sport where these guys are going to swing and play baseball. Like starting next Saturday is our first game on WIP, I think, 24th. They're going to play games, and not all of them in spring training, but when the season starts, they're going to play basically every day and hit every day for 6 to 7 months, and then 8 when you include the playoffs. And then all of a sudden, it's like, yeah, guys, take 5 or 6 days off and then come back and play a super competitive game against the best pitcher the team has in game 1. It is a disadvantage. Baltimore last year was the best team in the American League, and they looked flat when the playoffs started. The Braves were historically good. They looked flat, and part of that was Zach Wheeler's amazing, but they looked just flat when the playoffs started. So I do think, although I'll root for it, and it's good for the Phillies to play less playoff series because that's less times they could lose, yeah, I think under the current format, it is a disadvantage.
And it's almost interesting because usually the teams you play in the wild card round aren't that great, right? Like if you ask the Braves, would you rather take a week off or play the 84-win Marlins in a 3-game series, I think you would know the answer, right? And obviously the Phillies lost the pennant to an 84-win Diamondbacks team 2 weeks later. But I don't know, the way that the haves and the have-nots in the National League and the American League too, just it feels like there's such a huge gap that if you ask a team like the Braves or the Dodgers, would you rather a week off or play a team that's around 500 in a 3-game set? I think they'd be pretty confident in their ability to take care of business there. Another Phillies question from Dylan. Do you think the Phillies have enough firepower as they stand now to beat Atlanta and the Dodgers? Merrifield isn't going to be enough to move the needle, although it would help.
No, I don't. I still think they need one more player. And look, it doesn't have to come now. I know Cody Bellinger's out there now. We've talked about him a lot on this show. There's also the trade deadline where something could happen. I saw Ken Rosenthal last night bringing up our old buddy Mike Trout, saying, and maybe enough is enough at some point during this season. If they're terrible, he says, I can't do this anymore. So there will be opportunities to get more players and to add. But no, I mean, could the Phillies do it the way the Diamondbacks did it last year? Tucker just mentioned the Diamondbacks. Sure, we've seen the Phillies do it 2 years ago and get to the World Series. But when you stack up the Braves lineup right now and the Dodgers lineup and the Phillies, there's a difference. It just is. The top of the Braves lineup and Dodgers lineup, 1 through 4 or 5, is enormous. And the Phillies, it's not. It's like, we know we're getting out of Schwarber, assuming he hits 1. Turner, I'm not sure we're going to get out of him. Harper, I feel good about what we're going to get. And after that, your guess is as good as mine. Does Bohm take a leap? I don't know. Maybe this is what he is. Does Stott take another leap? I would guess so. Does Real Muto still have a lot left in him? I don't know. So, no, I don't think they have enough fire. Now, I like Whit Merrifield. We talked about him the other day. I think he would help, and I think he's a winning kind of player. But if you're talking about firepower, no, I don't think anyone, Tucker, has the firepower of the Braves and especially the Dodgers now. I mean, that top 3 in Los Angeles of Betts, Freeman, Ohtani might be the best top 3 I've ever seen in any lineup ever.
Yeah, I mean, you think about some of the all-time great lineups in our lifetimes, like the mid-90s Indians, the Yankees at the turn of the century, even the Phillies when they started to get hot, like 07 through 09, that kind of run. I mean, they have 3 guys who have a legitimate shot at winning MVP this year. 1, 2, 3 in their lineup. It's unbelievable. It's something that, like you said, I think is unmatched in our time watching baseball. Another baseball question, this one from Matt, asking, would you take a chance on Trevor Bauer, one of the best pitchers in baseball, willing to sign at a minimum deal? And he has a second question asking, what is your dream golf foursome?
All right, let's attack the Bauer one first. So I struggle with this question. We actually got it on the show yesterday, on the midday show. So I'm of 2 minds on this. Just if it's just a baseball question, who wouldn't want Trevor Bauer? He could pitch, and he wants a pitch for he seems like he's willing to take any kind of deal just to get back in the major leagues. And I don't think the time off probably affected him that much. I'm sure he could still be effective. But it's uncomfortable. I mean, I don't want to root for him. I wouldn't sign him. I'll say it like that. I wouldn't go out of my way to sign Trevor Bauer. Now, I know there's a lot out there. I'm sure people have read up or seen stuff. I know there was one legal situation that was settled. And I'm of the mind, like, if one thing happens, who knows? He said, she said, whatever. The legal stuff plays its course there, right? That's the way players are allowed to play again. But Tucker, there's multiple accusations against him, civil suits, other stuff. It just feels like it feels like an uncomfortable situation with a lot of still unknowns. If it was one situation and it was all settled, I'd probably want to say, okay, second chance time. But there's not. There's other people, and I know he's countersuing the one person, but there's not just one person that's accused him of some pretty tough things over the years.
Yeah, it's not fully shut yet. Like, if we do get to that point, by all means. But you're right. Like, I don't know. It feels like a weird thing. It feels like a can of worms that if you're Dave Dombrowski or John Middleton, do you really need to open that right now? Like, there's a reason why no other baseball team, there are a lot of teams who have pitching issues. There's a reason why none of them have necessarily taken a chance yet on Trevor Bauer.
Yeah. All right. Now, as far as the dream foursome, I'm not a big golfer, but I know this is always that kind of question, like if you could play golf, right? So when someone asks you a dream foursome for golf, do you include yourself in it, or am I with the other four people?
No, you would include yourself, unless you want a caddy, unless
I'll
kind
just
of sit on the sideline.
All right, because I have four names in my head. All right, because the Phillies are kind of spinning in my head right now. So I'll be the caddy, and we'll go with four former Phillies managers to be the foursome. Let's go with Charlie Manuel, Larry Boa, Terry Francona, and then let's throw Rob Thompson in there as the current Phillies manager. I always think baseball people have the best stories. Like, if you're going to hang out for like 3 or 4 hours and play a round of golf, I think they'd be great. You're probably surprised I didn't pick Gabe Kapler, but I think he's probably more likely, like, he seems better suited to go get coffee with or to sit down at a dive bar than to go golfing with.
I don't know if he would fit the vibes of your foursome.
That's what I'm saying.
I can't imagine like Charlie talking about hitting and, Rob Thompson and Terry Francona debating the usage of their bullpen. And then Kapler showing up with his coconut oil and protein powder and telling everybody just walk faster.
His TikTok a few weeks ago or a month ago when he was like, just walk faster. You'll get places faster.
If it's a 10-minute drive, first of all, where are you going where 10-minute drives and 10-minute walks are the same distance?
I don't know.
But just walk faster. Imagine him telling Charlie Manuel, who just had a stroke, hey, Charlie, just walk faster.
A little faster. Yeah, we'll leave Gabe out of this one. Maybe another time.
Another question from Tom. Do you think we'll see MVP level Trey Turner like we did after the ovations? If not, do you still want to undo his contract?
So are you ready for this, Tucker? Because this the next month or two, this conversation is going to pop up. Like, which Trey Turner are we going to get in 2024? And I think there's going to be an assumption, and I'm going to make a comparison here. Remember, I think it was 2019. Carson Wentz struggled the beginning of the season, right? Then he finished really strong, and the Eagles made the playoffs. And then heading into that next year, there was a conversation like, are we getting that Wentz all year? MVP level Wentz the way he played in December? I'm always like, give me the full body of work, and I think that's who you are. So you look at Trey's numbers. They didn't end up bad, but they ended up, for the fourth or fifth straight year, declining from the year before. His OPS was like, I don't know, what did it end up, 790s, 800, somewhere around there, 780?
778.
778, right? So that was a dip from 806, 810 the year before. He's dipped like 4 or 5 straight years now. So no, I don't expect an MVP level Trey Turner. I don't know if we're ever seeing those days again. Now, he could have streaks. He's streaky, but I don't. Like, if he gives the Phillies an 800 OPS and it's kind of a more steady version of how he ended last year, less ups and downs, I'll take that. But no, I don't think we're getting that player. That felt to me like a super hot streak rather than what he is. He had led the league in errors. He strikes out a lot. I don't think that stuff is changing. As far as undoing his contract, yeah, I could spend that money in better ways. I don't have a ready replacement right now, so I'm not excited to do it today. They need to go play a season. But yeah, I still think that contract's going to be a problem. And I don't think we're getting an MVP level player. I heard Jack yesterday afternoon say he thinks he'll finish top 10 MVP in the NL. And I was like, I don't know. There's a lot of good NL players. You mentioned 3 on the Dodgers. We have Bryce Harper here. The Braves have like 2 or 3. I'd be happy if he did, but I don't expect that.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned his OPS dating back to 2020, which is his best year in the Nationals. Obviously, small sample size, was 982, was 911 in 2021, was 809 in 2022, and then 778 last year. Like, that's a shortstop at the age of 31 this year, kind of in a bit of a decline. So it'd be great, certainly, but at this point, I do wonder if maybe they jump the gun on letting Brayson Stott just figure things out at shortstop, and then you fill in second base with someone making half the money, and then you could sign a pitcher or someone like Shohei Ohtani, who was on the free agent market last year. Another question from Rick: Who will be the best player in Philadelphia 5 years from now?
5 years makes it hard, right? 3 years, I feel like we could just kind of roll through the guys that are really good right now and just assume
A lot of aging veterans.
Yeah, guys that are in their 30s and have maybe some injury issues, or even a year ago, if you asked me this question, I still probably Jalen Hurts would still be a good bet, but he didn't play great this past season, and he's a quarterback that's been banged up a lot. So 5 years from now, I don't know what Jalen Hurts looks like. I mean, at the same age that Hurts will be 5 years from now, I think Cam Newton was done. So it's a tricky question. The three names that pop to my head right away are Jalen Carter, because if he's as good as we think he could be, he's kind of right in that sweet spot of his mid to late 20s. Tyrese Maxey will still be in his 20s 5 years from now, and though he's already an all-star player. And Bryson Stott. I think Stott's going to have a long, good career here in Philadelphia. But there's also like the Andrew Painter, who we don't know about, but he obviously has a chance, and we heard how great he was going to be. I will say right now, Jalen Carter is the answer. Jalen Carter turns into, a perennial Pro Bowler, and he's still that guy.
Yeah, I think he fits the profile better than. It's just weird because he doesn't play a high profile position, right? People want it to be your superstar in basketball, your quarterback, your shortstop. But picking an defensive tackle, I think he's the safest bet by far. From Seth, wants to know what's been your favorite take over the years, and if you could have one back, what would it be?
Ooh, I mean, Tucker heard a lot of these on the evening show. So favorite take, I'll just keep this simple. The Eagles should have kept Foles and traded Wentz. I mean, that's the take that will never go away. They should have. It would all worked out better if they traded, Wentz at his highest peak and kept Foles and gave another year or two starting. They probably would have ended up with Jalen Hurts as their quarterback anyway. Just give him another year and then draft Jalen Hurts. As far as the one I wish I could take back, I never think about that because, I don't know, take's a take. But here's what I'll say on that. So I don't wish we didn't do the show because I think it was a fun show and it was a good show. But when we did the show, I don't know, a week before the playoffs started in 2022, that I wish the Phillies didn't make the playoffs. It's just because it pained me as I didn't want the Phillies to do well when the playoffs started. That wasn't true. I just was frustrated at them. And then they get swept by the Cubs. Cubs.
They were bad. They were bad in like mid-September.
Yeah, they were terrible. So it was like, they're not going to do anything anyway. What's the point of even making the playoffs? They'll just fool themselves and blah, blah, blah. I think it was a fun show that night. And I think it was, I'm glad we did the show. But it feels like people thought I didn't want them to do well when the playoffs started. And that obviously wasn't true because that was a fun October.
Yeah, I think they finished the season like 5-12.
They're terrible.
And limped in. Thanks to the Marlins, right? The Marlins swept the Brewers on the final weekend of the season and got them in. A question from Steve. I saw your post a couple months ago about the Football 100 book. Which player ranking surprised you the most?
So two of them did. And I understand why one of them was where he was when they published. Patrick Mahomes was like towards the 100 level rather than 1. And I get it, right? When they published or wrote it, he probably had played 4 or 5 years. This was written a year ago or whatever, published. And so I understand why it was tough to rank him as he's just in the first third of his career or whatever he is. And he hadn't won certainly this last Super Bowl. I don't even know if he had won the second one when they wrote the story. So the fact that he was in the 100, yeah, of course he should be. But the fact that he was so close towards the bottom, and they even said it like in the story, like, or the part of the book, we don't know where to rank him. He's going to rank way higher. It's really hard because he's, doing his legacy as this book is published. But when you open the book now, it's like he's not the 98th best player ever. He's closer to the best. So that was a little weird. The other one was Emmitt Smith. I forget exactly where he was, but I think he was in the 20s. And the reason that kind of threw me for a loop is because my recollection of Emmitt Smith and the way he's been talked about since is he was really good, but he played behind the best offensive line. And what a great, a good quarterback and a great receiver. I remember him being diminished a little bit because anyone could have run behind those guys. But then as I read the section of the book, it was like, well, he was the most durable back, and he did take the carries and run every single year for 15 years. And that's why, Tucker, I don't think anyone will ever surpass Emmitt Smith's record. One, because that, and two, there's no lead backs anymore that even get those kind of carries. So I probably underrated Emmitt Smith over the years, maybe because he was a Cowboy and I didn't like the Cowboys, but he was great.
Yeah, I think he's ranked 29th on that list. I just looked it up, which feels about right. Like Barry Sanders was a couple spots ahead of him. But you're right. Like, who's the best? Like, McCaffrey's the best running back in football now. It's not going to sniff that record. Derrick Henry was probably the closest guy to that. He's not going to come close. Like that's a record I think it's going to stand forever. Like Frank Gore played like 25 years to even come close to it and finished. I think he was third or fourth or fifth by the time he retired. But yeah, Emmitt Smith, I think, is going to be at the top for a while. And the final question from Kyle: what's the best show or movie you've watched recently?
So I've got two Netflix shows that I've watched recently. One, just because my wife was watching and I just started like watching with her, and I was like, this is actually pretty good. And the other one was kind of my pick, and I'm in the middle of watching it. So the first one was The Crown. You ever watch The Crown? It's good. I was like, am I really going to like this? It's about the Queen of England and it's about the family, the royal family. But it was really good. And I kind of lived through the Princess Diana thing because I was a kid then. I was a big story. So that kind of resonated with me a little bit. The other one I'm watching right now is Fool Me Once. I guess it's based on a book. I never read the book, but it's about a woman who her husband is murdered and her sister is murdered in a small span of time. And there's a connection between it. And she can't trust anyone. And it seems like the whole thing is like against her. So something's going on and trying to figure out like who's the bad guy in this basically, because they are all kind of seem like the bad guy. So that one's pretty good. You watch anything new?
No, you know what I've been watching? I've been watching The Simpsons. I decided to go back to the beginning and start at season 1. And it's been like 3 months and I've made it to like season 9. I'm only a quarter of the way through. But unbelievable. For a show that when I was a kid, it was viewed as like washed and not that good anymore. Go back and watch like the first 7 seasons of The Simpsons. It's unbelievable television.
It holds up too.
Show of the 90s.
Yeah, it holds up. The Simpsons and Seinfeld, I think you could put on forever. They're just funny.
I think Seinfeld, like when you watch Friends, it seems like it's in the 90s. For some reason, when you watch Seinfeld, like I know they don't have cell phones or like normal technology. It feels relevant today, even though
it's just funny. It just works.
It's 30 years old. At
this point. It's great. This was fun. All right, we'll do more of these AMA mailbags. If you have questions you're watching on YouTube, throw them in the chat. We'll grab them and we'll do them in a future episode. Appreciate everyone listening, subscribing, following WIP Daily. We'll talk soon.